thing I've learned about playing that Bird Mage is you need kind of things to come together, or else you just kind of look like a bad tempo mage deck of old. Right? You get elemental allies with no elementals, you know, you're not really doing much. You get Imprisoned Phoenix, but nothing to capitalize on it, or like no cram session. And you also have to be careful of when to use your Imprisoned Phoenix. It's not a guaranteed play on turn 2, right? Because if you don't have the follow-up to it, it's, you know, that's such a important tool for the deck to function. So I'm excited though. It's the OTK Demon Hunter starting things off for DeadDraw and that Bird Mage. Kind of funny. These are the two decks we talked about the most.
Absolutely. It's almost as if it was planned. For Bozzzton, he does start off with a 1-drop in hand and the Phoenix. You're talking about the timing on this. Even though it's not automatically played early on, I still think it is absolutely a keep in the mulligan just because it makes all of the follow-up plays so much more powerful. Cram Session being the first one that comes to mind, but good for Bozzzton. He picks up the Confection Cyclone, so even if he doesn't necessarily want to turbo out the Phoenix, he has things to do in the early game. On DeadDraw's side, the Skull of Gul'dan already found and in a position that is only one card away from outcast position, and the card that is trapping it, quote unquote, is very easy to get rid of, because I feel that the main problem of this Demon Hunter deck is the Skull being kept in the middle by a card you don't want to throw away, like Moarg or Il'gynoth at worst.
Yeah, this is quite a good opening hand for draw. Just gonna have the ability to draw a lot of the deck. The big question is, what is this double jump going to hit? And, you know, it could be the difference of drawing his entire deck before turn 7 or not. But Bozzzton still needs a little bit of help for his hand. He needs the Cram Session or the Elemental Allies. Either will do at this stage effectively. If he gets the Cram Session, you can play Imprisoned Phoenix, bank that spell damage, then draw a bunch of cards. Elemental Allies, obviously the Confection Cyclone is... gets that quest completed by itself, which is a pretty big deal. One of the reasons why people are relatively hyped about that card, just for how it fits into kind of these low-curve mage decks.
It just reminds me so much of Firefly, which is one of my favorite cards in Hearthstone of old. That's not to say, though, that you don't play it when you don't have Elemental Allies here. Bozzzton definitely still has a way of trying to chip some damage in the early game by just putting minions on board. Of course, it can get swept up by things such as the Immolation Aura from DeadDraw, but it's currently not in hand, and Bozzzton has the luxury of being able to kind of space out his minions, even if the first set of AoE should come out.
Well, there you go. Like you said, Ivy coming down. Very easy usage on that to get that skull into outcast position. Just a couple more turns before that can come down. And DeadDraw does have plays between now and then, right? Blood Mage Thalnos can just be played onto the board and can start chipping away with the hero power, cleaning up the board with the hero power. So we'll see. Is this the Imprisoned Phoenix turn?
What to do? What to do?
I wonder what he's setting up for there. That's the big question. Doesn't have precision in hand, doesn't have a particular amount of burn. I do suppose that Bozzzton is just kind of hoping that he's going to be able to pick it up, maybe with Magic Trick, maybe off the top. He still has 2 turns to be able to do so. Maybe he realizes his hand is so minion heavy that he kind of just needs to get the spell damage off the board and maybe bank damage early, force DeadDraw to play defensive around the time that he would want to draw cards. And then go from there, hope he finds like the fireballs and stuff to finish the game later. Elemental Allies after he played the Elementals. Oh man, a little bit rough. Still can find one with like Primordial Studies, but it's not the most likely. And we'll just get this out of the way. But we'll see. Bozzzton's going to need some help. He's not really piecing together damage. Only has the Arcane Missiles available in order to capitalize on this Imprisoned Phoenix going to the next turn. It's like a Soul Cleave up for DeadDraw. Not a great turn, to say the least. He can part ways with a Fell Screen Blast here, but lifesteal's kind of wasted. And he is going into that Imprisoned Phoenix next turn. So we'll have to see.
I am back now, talking to myself once again and unaware that I had crashed. So sorry. But I mean, I was trying to think about the upsides of the Discover, because both the Devolving Missiles and the Deep Freeze seemed entirely too slow for this matchup, but he was down an Elemental to get the Elemental allies really active. But maybe Bozzzton can discover a way to still activate it. For DeadDraw though, wow, Il'gynoth is early.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this because other than that, his play would really just be what? Fell Screen Blast, and then that's it. Or Soul Cleave, sure. Yeah. But by doing this when the Imprisoned Phoenix is emerging, it's just a Frostbolt and a ping that deals with the Il'gynoth.
Right.
It's leaving it very vulnerable, and it's not like this deck can piece together too much damage later on in the game. Yes, you have the weapon. You can make some pretty big Moarg Artificers, right? But the Moarg Artificers get kind of chunked down pretty easily by this deck. Arcane Missiles with a Moarg Artificer on the board, or if you play two because you're trying to temple them, a single Arcane Missiles can sometimes clear the board with a little bit of spell damage. So
yeah. Arcane Explosion as well. I mean, I am honestly shocked by this Tempo Il'gynoth from DeadDraw. You did mention, because this is the turn when the Imprisoned Phoenix gets activated, it is super easy to get rid of it. And even if this wasn't an Imprisoned Phoenix on the board, I would still, hesitate to go for this play from DeadDraw's perspective, because it's still just a fireball away from dying. And if that gets cleared, DeadDraw's main win condition is very iffy to me. He has a lot of card draw, but he does very much have to rely on winning on board here.
Yeah. It's possible that maybe he was thinking that Bozzzton had set up that Imprisoned Phoenix in order to maybe like cram session and draw cards and go for like a setup turn. And wanted to disrupt it, like either say, well, if you want to draw cards, you're leaving my Il'gynoth up, and then I can, maybe net some more damage. But now he's got to operate this game without it, and it's actually not looking too bad because Bozzzton's pretty much out of stuff, right? Elemental Allies is, unless the second Confection Cyclone comes off the top, it's going to be pretty tough for Bozzzton to generate resources. Well, Tricaster plus Cram Session could be an option.
Right. That is Bozzzton's ticket back into the game, right? I think DeadDraw went for his tempo Il'gynoth play, kind of having a soft read on Bozzzton's hand, just not immediately activating the Elemental Allies. He knows that there was still a coin in there. So I think DeadDraw was trying to take this window of saying, maybe you just don't have stuff, and I can try to win with Moargs that I pick off of my skull in the near future. But Bozzzton has quite a few turns to find something to do.
Ooh.
This is not it, though.
It's an elemental, so it opens up a top deck.
Right.
But
the thing is, the top deck would still just be Confection Cyclone, so it would
you're right.
activate itself anyway.
Yeah.
If it's Ping Pass, the thing Bozzzton has to be most scared of is, I guess, DeadDraw playing down a bunch of buffed Moargs off of Philosophy.
Yeah.
This is just such a strange pan out.
Yeah. Yeah. If DeadDraw does play a bunch of buff marks, Kieran Tor Tricaster and Arcade Missiles is just each missile that hits a minion kills it.
Yeah. Instantly poison missiles.
Yeah. So I don't think he's too concerned, but he's just concerned about resources right now.
Right.
from DeadDraw's perspective, he's just trying to think, how do I win the game from here? Let's hope that Raging Fell Screamer goes a long, long way.
I honestly feel that aside from the Raging Fell Screamer, because you mentioned the Moargs are essentially made of glass and die to the slightest bit of spell damage from Bozzzton, I think that DeadDraw needs to rely on Illidari studies giving him some type of miracle. I don't know of many Outcast cards that generate that much value, but as for now, both players are just dealing a singular damage to each other every turn.
Yeah. Well, Bozzzton does pick up the second elemental, so we'll get that elemental allies active next turn with the Violet Spellwing. And then the following turn, once the imprisoned Phoenix emerges, Kirin-Tor Tricaster, and then double Arcane Missiles. I wouldn't have the mana.
Certainly very interesting. I just think Bozzzton needs to be very careful about when he uses all this spell damage, because essentially if he's not killing DeadDraw in a single turn, DeadDraw can heal pretty much all of it back up. You can assume that safely now, given that, you probably have some Moargs in hand. There's still the double I-beams and the other Fellscream Blast. So I don't think Boston's just going to be cashing in spell damage while it's there. It has to be something decisively either giving him the board or just dealing lethal.
Yeah.
I like to think they teach me.
Great pickup for DeadDraw, though. Finally, some board presence. And this is pretty much, outside of the Moargs, the last of DeadDraw's board development. So it has to be quite... it has to carry a lot of work here, because Bozzzton is finally drawing some juice.
Want Thief and Magic can maybe try and craft a game plan. Whoa.
Pyroblast is so tempting, but again, it's that problem of if it's not immediate lethal, DeadDraw almost certainly heals back up.
But are any of the other ones worth it?
Maybe... I can't believe I'm about to suggest Tome over Pyroblast, but that's where my head's at. I think Bozzzton just really wants some board clear right now. Rolling Fireball would be awesome. Something around those lines. He does end up taking the Pyro, though. Combustion? That's pretty good.
Ooh. Yeah, Combustion's gonna...
clean up the majority. Okay, it's gonna cash in on the missiles as well.
Nice. And like you said, that was pretty much the last bit of pressure that DeadDraw could muster. The minions left remaining in the deck for DeadDraw is like an Acidic Swamp Ooze and the Moarg Artificers, which isn't going to do much.
I mean, there's going to be a fair amount of 3/5s in the near future. I'll say that.
But there's a Violet Spellwing on board, right? Like, that even with just the Imprisoned Phoenix, with the one Arcade Missile being played with a Moarg on board, that's a, like you said, poisonous missiles, essentially. So it feels so bad playing the Moargs into this board specifically. But I think also DeadDraw has to know that Bozzzton also knows what's left in his deck, right? Also knows that his pressure is going to be very limited without Il'gynoth and with just the Moargs left for minion pressure.
I think DeadDraw can certainly afford to wait this turn. It's still enthusiastic to think the Moargs will survive at nearly any point in the game, because Bozzzton for sure has at least one spell damage minion in hand, and he will be able to get another missiles at some point as soon as this Violet Spellwing dies. But certainly DeadDraw can at least let the Imprisoned Phoenix go off and then clear with something like Immolation Aura before playing the Moarg Artificers. But as long as Bozzzton doesn't get too carried away with drawing too many cards, I don't see how DeadDraw can necessarily win the game at the moment. He can heal for a lot, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Unless he just
really
hero power every turn. 20 hero powers. And okay, Eldrazi Warblades. Something like that.
Eldrazi Warblades is, I mean, he's got both of his Warblades left.
Correct.
And that's with the hero power, 6 damage over 2 turns. That's a good amount. Also offsetting a little bit of the healing as well. DeadDraw, we talked about a lot of the healing, but he's got 1 I-Beam left, 1 Fell Scream Blast.
Right.
And because he's used I-Beam, he's used 1 Fell Scream, he's used Soul Cleave. So just going for like these incremental heals each turn and not being able to go for like the burst heal. He knows that he's going to have to play these more Artificers as like tempo plays. So I don't know, we'll see. But right now, Bozzzton, just no reason for him to really do anything because he knows that DeadDraw's just waiting to clear and waiting to heal.
Bozzzton holds on to the Raz as well. Doesn't want to give DeadDraw a target for the removal that he knows is kind of just clogging up his hand at this point. Bozzzton can do the math here. The deck lists are open, so if you know that DeadDraw has absolutely no threats other than Moargs and Ooze left, there is no reason for Bozzzton to just give minions and feed them for DeadDraw to get rid of. The only thing Bozzzton doesn't have going for him right now is card advantage. So as long as he holds on to the Raz and Kirin Tor combo, and importantly the missiles he'll get off of the Spell Wing for a clear, he is absolutely chilling.
And he looks like he is too.
Yeah, posture says it all.
There you go.
No, I've seen Bozzzton look stressed every now and then in GM.
Quite rarely. What an offensive from DeadDraw. 3-2.
Get him. So this can be a Pyroblast turn. I can see that happening because even though you know DeadDraw has a lot of heal, this kind of makes it so that if DeadDraw wants to go for a big heal, he has to target his own minion to make that happen.
True mastery takes dedication.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
I kind of like the Pyroblast too. It's not like he had a ton of damage in hand. What would it be? 6 damage from hand with Kirin Tor Tricaster plus double Frostbolt. But you put him down to 13, and like you said, you force him to
12 damage
kill off
with
his
the
own
Kirin
minions.
Tors. Like
Kirin Tor Tricaster Frostbolt Bolt, so he would.
It's technically a 2-turn.
Well, he was at 20. He was at 23. Would have been at 23.
Oh, right.
Or 13 if he had played Pyroblast, sorry.
Correct.
So not quite a 2-turn setup, but
very close. With Sorcerer's Apprentice, for example, off the top would have been lethal.
Yep.
In any case, the first Moarg has arrived. It can be dealt with by a single Frostbolt as it stands. And I think by spacing out the Moargs, DeadDraw is making the best he can out of a bad situation, because if all the Moargs come down simultaneously, then they get dealt with by a single Arcane Explosion or a single Arcane Missiles plus spell damage. So he's making it so that Bozzzton has to remove them one by one and using his resources a lot less efficiently. DeadDraw doesn't feel like he's in a good spot though, shaking his head. And I think it's because he knows he's probably never going to connect minion damage from this point on. So this Eldrazi Warblades plus hero power has to get a whole lot done.
Yeah, so let's see. If he never gets minion damage in and he picks up the next Eldrazi Warblades right on time, he's dealing 12 damage over 4 turns and then needs 7 more. So he needs 11 turns, at which point he will be 4 cards into fatigue, and that's if he doesn't draw anymore.
And he won't draw anymore, but a lot of his cards do nothing but draw, like the skull. And so this can be pretty much just mathed out. Even if Bozzzton, for example, Pyroblasts a minion, I think it's absolutely fine.
Yeah. He just has to make sure that he doesn't draw many cards, which Bozzzton does have. I mean, he's got Elemental Allies double Cram Session still left in the deck. But like outside of that, he has Jandis, right? Which is a pretty big minion. Also has another Confection Cyclone, which, maybe DeadDraw struggles to deal with. I don't know. But he's got the tools to be able to do it. So I think, yeah, for Bozzzton, it's just about killing each and every minion, and
he should be able
Wait.
to track how many of them are left. He's seen double philosophy. I believe those were natural copies from the deck. Correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah.
And so it should, after this one, just be another Moar that he has to worry about. And whether it's Fireball or even a Pyroblast that deals with it, the other minions that DeadDraw plays, which are the Og Merchants, die to pings or Arcane Missiles. So Bozzzton should be in the clear. And the awkward thing for DeadDraw is Bozzzton is very smartly not damaging DeadDraw any more than he has to here. And DeadDraw means that he's kind of missing the healing, quote unquote. The thing is though, if he waits to get full healing, it means he's missing the 1 damage hero power every turn, which he kind of needs to put Bozzzton on the slowest lethal clock in Hearthstone history.
Yeah.
Let's make something real.
Oh, Totem
Ooh.
Goliath.
Whoa,
Spicy.
okay. Totem Goliath is actually pretty sick because he'll just have a natural spell damage on board pretty much always. Forces DeadDraw to have to deal with this. That's quite a good outcome.
And DeadDraw doesn't even have a clear for this at the moment. Okay, Chaos Strike is some damage that we forgot to factor in.
But it's also accelerates his fatigue.
Right.
So it accelerates the turn clock by 2, but he already needed 7 turns. So okay, now he needs 5 turns, but then he has 1 less turn of his own before fatigue damage kicks in, and Bozzzton still has a ton of burn damage left in his hand
Right.
/ deck. So
I think for DeadDraw, this could be a turn to play Moarg and say the Og Merchants to deal with Jandis and the Illusion minion. And then just hero power face. The next turn, he can expect to have taken damage from the Totem Golem / any spells that Bozzzton plays. So maybe that's when you go in with the Eldraki and the Chaos Strike. Alternatively, he can just hold on to the Moarg for the Fell Scream that's still in his deck, which can, make up for the damage he'll take by leaving up minions anyway. I could not tell you which line is better. I just know this is the weirdest pan out of this matchup I've ever seen.
You're paying for my discretion.
yeah, this is bizarre.
Another thing to note is that Bozzzton, if he is out of natural frostbolts in the deck, forgive me, I can't quite remember, he can maybe even discover some of those, which would slow down DeadDraw's clock even more.
Yeah.
I wonder.
So now, Bozzzton, I think, just carries on with the Arcane Missiles. Is this a blunder from like 20 turns ago of when he played the Elkanon? Or is this a more recent blunder?
I wonder.
Players like this, they're sometimes they can get caught up in one thing that they did wrong way early into the game. So I would think that that is about the Yoggonoth. But I saw where his head was at. He didn't want to have like this completely dead turn against a deck that can do a lot of crazy things with Imprisoned Phoenix on the board, but at the same time, it also just, opened him up to letting Bozzzton get value off an Imprisoned Phoenix that he otherwise wouldn't have had.
Maybe I'm missing some other piece of damage from DeadDraw here. That's something I didn't think about.
I don't think so.
Well, the Chaos
Does he have
Strike...
natural Moarg left? Yep, there it is. And
Card draw. I think there's
Double
still
jump?
a Fell Scream blast.
yeah,
in there.
Fell Scream.
So the Chaos Strike is still a big deal because it also heals DeadDraw for a bit. But again, like we've been saying for many turns now, we don't know if the fatigue can get there. However, with the Fell Scream Blast Double Moarg, assuming that DeadDraw has enough targets to heal with it, maybe he gets there because it's going to take 4 turns of weaponless swings for DeadDraw to finally finish off Bozzzton.
Yes. And in that time, he will start taking fatigue damage.
Right.
So
So Bozzzton's line here, he could go for a lot of card draw if he likes, but again, he should know about this Fell Scream Blast, which the more minions he plays, the more DeadDraw actually gets to heal off of it. And so, is it ever just Crime Session for one? I don't know, man.
I think it's just draw the one.
Time runs out on me. Shield or spot.
So he can afford to draw cards. It's just what you mentioned, because he has four this. Actually, no, this shortens the clock by one, because he'll draw his no. Yeah, he would die on the tick on the last turn, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I feel like Bozzzton is now unfavored. Because DeadDraw gets to heal back to full.
Now he can't try caster plus arcane missiles to clear off Moargs anymore.
Correct. I think there's still Arcane Explosion in Bozzzton's decks. He has some top decks, but
Yeah, there's two. There's two arcane explosions left.
yeah. But even if he does clear this board without taking any damage, right? DeadDraw now just has to hero power a couple times and wait for fatigue. Okay, I didn't even account for the Totem Golem staying alive. That's my bad. This changes a lot. Because now he has spell damage totem after this trade, and then the missiles is almost certainly going to deal with the Morg.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, Bozzzton has this. Oh, no, because Immolation Aura. Wow, he
Okay, there's
really wanted an Arcane Explosion.
Yeah, that means he's valuing the 5 damage off the Totem Golem more than staying away from fatigue, which, if he has accounted for the Immolation Aura, I think is wrong. But again, I can't tell you for sure. This is
Because Immolation
kinda
Aura will
difficult
clear
at
the
first. Yeah.
will clear the whole board, but it'll leave 1 damage live plus a spell damage. Then he starts taking fatigue next turn, and then so Bozzzton next turn just Pyroblasts.
Oh,
And then double arcane
Wait.
missiles with spell damage when the imprisoned Phoenix comes out.
something like that. The one thing I forgot to account for is the Taunt Totem. That's actually really huge here. That draw.
Oh, the taunt totem.
Yeah, the Taunt Totem.
Oh man.
And so, wasn't he supposed to attack face first? Oh no, sorry. Oh, the Immolation
Does he
Aura,
want-
the second half of it goes on the totems. Okay,
Yeah.
just
All
like
right,
how
so
Soul
you-
of the Forest works. Got it?
I'm
Yeah.
almost out of
Oh no, he wins because he Pyroblasts this turn, then double arcane missiles next turn. He got him. Okay.
Right. Oh man.
What a weird game. I'm pretty sure
Really
Bozzzton
weird.
did just math that out. Yeah.
Okay.
Whew. But without the Pyroblast. That's a way different game. A way
Sure,
different
for sure.
game. So
I
that's
mean,
just a
I-
lesson.
I would just like to gather all of the Hearthstone players who have classically been renowned for their fatigue play, gather them into one round table and have a long discussion on how that was meant to be played out. Because I think with enough math and situations mapped out, you can figure out a mathematically correct most of the time play to get a guaranteed win from Bozzzton there. But obviously the biggest question is whether DeadDraw was right in playing the Il'gynoth that early on, because honestly, when I've talked to players who play this Demon Hunter very often, it seems like the cardinal sin is not timing tempo Il'gynoth right, because it often feels like if you're playing Il'gynoth before the combo is active, it needs to be almost guaranteed that it sticks the next turn.
Yeah. The bright side for DeadDraw there, I guess, is that I think post playing Il'gynoth, like he played the game as good as you could have without that resource, right? Spreading out the Moargs so they're not, vulnerable to single arcane explosion or single arcane missiles. playing against what he knew was there instead of what could have been, right? You know, the way he played that and mapped that out, if there was no Pyroblast, right, or Totem Goliath is just a 5-5 and not a 5-5 with this Death Rattle, that game's a lot closer, and maybe he even wins. So I think he did with the resources that, you know, he was presented with after playing his Il'gynoth. I think that was a pretty well played game. It just, you know, hard to get over that.
Right. On Bozzzton's side, sorry, there's already the next deck, but I want to keep discussing that end game there. Even though it seemed unnecessary to me at first for him to draw with the Cram Session, I think Bozzzton absolutely identified that once he puts down any board, DeadDraw would have been forced to use his heal, which is the Fellscream Blast, also as board removal. And so after that Fellscream Blast checkpoint is passed, all of his burn suddenly becomes permanent because DeadDraw by that point will not have any more healing spells. And so the timing of when the Pyroblast came down and knowing that it's okay to draw as long as he takes that one last resource from DeadDraw away was spot on. And I'm very impressed by the end of that. And we will move on to Bozzzton on this next deck, the Whirlkick Rogue, which was piloted very, very well by Impact in the previous series.
Yeah, and it's a deck that a ton of players are piloting to top 50, top 25, top 10 legend, you know, right up there with Highlander Priest for strongest meta deck for ladder in the right hands. That's a very long award, but it's definitely up there. Feels like it never really runs out of stuff with Secret Passage, with World Kick Master, with Swindle. It just every single turn it feels like it can redevelop a board, generate additional resources. And you know, it also has multiple ways to win, right? It can play like this aggressive style because of the Nitro Boost potions. It can play like this heavy resource style because of the cards I just mentioned. And you know, it could even get off to those crazy starts with Questing Adventure, where you find yourself looking at a 6/6 questing on turn 3, and you're like, I have no way to deal with this. I'm dead. So
Watch.
I think Lorinda put it really well in saying that aggro decks these days, if they are of the top echelons, because I do think that aggro rogue is at least, or World Kick Rogue is at least one tier higher than Zoo altogether. It's because they are able to never run out of stuff on top of that aggression, and the rogue also has the flexibility going for it, so can be very, very scary to deal with. That said, Demon Hunter has quite a lot of healing, so maybe the aggro down with the Nitro Boost game plan is eliminated from Bozzzton, but he still has that questing game plan. And importantly, Flick Skyshiv is not to be underestimated in this matchup, because I've made the mistake as Demon Hunter of playing Tempo Morgs, thinking I could get control of the board after my big clear, but one flick can change all of that. And it's actually kept Bozzzton here.
Yeah, auto keep, I think, in the matchup, because you mentioned that it's hard to go for those aggro plans because DeadDraw can just heal back up. But if you go for this aggro plan where you're saying you can heal back up, but you have to use a Moarg to heal back up efficiently, and then you have the flick to back it up, that all of a sudden reopens up that game plan of being able to play aggressive. Boston's hand right now doesn't spell aggression. He's got Foxy Fraud Swindle, which is like the, you know, the ultimate value start, right? But just definitely something to note. What about playing it on turn 2 before Flick is even able to come out?
That's spicy.
He's got to kill it before then, right?
I mean, not necessarily. It's not as if the Moarg is threatening that much damage, but it is a decently statted minion that can, you know, for example, if Bozzzton has the Foxy Shroud but not the backstab, just take some value traits and kind of preemptively heal DeadDraw by not letting him take that much minion damage in the early game. In the end, we do see DeadDraw hold back on it and also hold back on the Illidari studies. I think he wants to time this on turn 4 so that the skull can come down a bit earlier, but before that happens, he also needs to get rid of Consume Magic. The planning for Demon Hunter is very, very complicated because of how Illidari studies interacts with outcast cards and how the outcast cards free up each other.
Yeah. And Consume Magic is not really a card that you feel super comfortable in just dumping against Rogue, right? Because as soon as you play that, especially if you're trying to set up for Skull in Outcast position, that's when Questing comes down and ruins your day. And then next turn, not only do you not have your Consume Magic, but you also probably can't get away with just playing a Skull and using up all your mana unless you have the follow-up.
It's a case of DeadDraw cannot have the best of both worlds, that being, the discounted Skull in outcast position and the insurance of Consume Magic. I often find myself just throwing caution to the wind with this deck because Skull is the center of it, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him use Consume Magic just to free up the Skull for 5 mana with the Illidari Studies, but it's scary, make no mistake.
Yeah. And that is a little awkward. That Skull position.
Say the least, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, maybe it is. The more I think about it, the more, I like your strategy. Who cares? Dump the Consume Magic. I don't need it anyway.
My strategy is to just discover another one off the Illidari Studies.
There you go. All right.
And there's 2 shots at
studies.
it. Glide is kind of interesting, but IBM is just a safer pick, of course. And he cannot play any more Outcast cards because the Skull on the left has been set up.
Time grows short.
At this point, you're kind of conceding that whatever you discover is not going to be in Outcast position for a very long time. So I think just taking I-Beams is safe. You're almost never going to get the value off of the Dreadlord's Bite. Gonna go ahead and save the weapon as well, even if it floats a mana.
Get the max amount of healing from it.
The passage turn? His hand's so bad.
Yeah. Do you prep it to have just a little more mana to try and in case you get value generating cards, you want the hand space on this side of the hand, this side of the passage.
Like, the prep's just not doing anything else. I guess you could get ambush, but ambush is so unimpactful in this matchup, I would say.
What if you dump both preps? What if you prep ambush, prep secret passage? No, because he wants value, right? From the cards that he gets up from the secret passage. If he just preps secret passage, then he's got 3.
Not much hand space. Yeah.
Not much hand space. But with 4 cards, can you really generate that much with only 4? I don't know. I think I'm being a little too hopeful.
Not enough answers. In the end, it looks like Bozzzton is just going to delay the passage a bit longer, and this breakpoint is pretty significant because it would allow him to play, for example, Jandis off of the passage.
Yeah.
If he preps it out.
Yeah. I like this. This was my last turn, me asking those questions was basically me figuring out what Bozzzton did, but way slower than he did. And I didn't figure it out until he showed me. I was like, wait, no, you prepped the ambush, you have more hand space, but what if you dump your hand this turn and then secret pass the next turn? Just genius.
Brilliant. It, of course, has the downside of not developing much this turn, and ideally this is the turn you would want to develop because you're very much expecting a Skull after those double studies on the previous turn. I think DeadDraw is in a very comfortable position, just needs to figure out the best way to free up this second Skull because it would involve dumping Moarg. Maybe that's not even necessary because he already has a discount on Il'gynoth. So to get a full combo of, say, 24, he doesn't even need any more discounted Moargs. Really, he's just looking for Fellscream Blast and Philosophy. The rest of the combo is there. Or just the plain second Moarg.
I mean, look how much damage he just has right now.
Yeah, with I-Beams, right?
Yeah, because Il'gynoth, the Ethereal Aug Merchant, and Moarg, that's 3 mana. I-Beam would be 4 mana, and that's 8 damage. And then Chaos Strike for free is an additional 8 damage, so that's 16. It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, another Moarg, I think, is another Moarg just straight up lethal? I don't know if he has the mana, but certainly he has time, because even if it's not lethal this turn, he has I-Beams, even the expensive ones. and Bozzzton largely whiffed on his secret passage.
Yeah. I think other Moarg still is 24, but right now, if that skull was somewhere else, if that skull was like anywhere else, and DeadDraw could just chain the I-beams, right?
Right.
Maybe.
Oh, okay. Wait. So
It's not it. It's 24, right?
hold on. 4 damage. I-beam gets doubled twice.
So it's 16.
16,
and then
right?
And then the Aldraki Warblade stays the same because it's not a spell. So
Correct.
it's still 8.
Yes, you're right. It is 4 damage off lethal. And so I think DeadDraw is perfectly content to just dump a card, probably one of the I-beams in the middle.
Wait,
And
you could hear. Oh no, you couldn't hear power. Never mind. Sorry, I interrupted your thought.
no worries.
I got excited.
Time grows short.
The question is just whether he wants to swing this turn if he feels like he's in danger of dying. So obviously if you don't swing, you miss out on the healing you get from the Chaos Strike, but if you do swing, you miss out on some of the damage you get from Il'gynoth. I think with the amount of damage DeadDraw is already accruing, he doesn't need the weapon damage with just a little bit more mana flexibility. So I like the swing.
Spin like the suns, strike like the
Okay.
winds.
I don't think there's any combination of cards that Bozzzton can get to give him lethal immediately.
Yeah, he's used both preps.
Nitro boost is a lot. And as it stands, DeadDraw next turn has still the 16, right? Because the other
yes.
I-beam is still too expensive. But he has quite a few top decks. Like Fellscream Blast. The other Ethereal Og Merchant, I believe, would be lethal.
Be 5 doubled twice. No, it wouldn't quite be there, right?
Oh, not quite. Yeah, my bad. Would be 20.
We're getting to the point where the numbers are going to be so large.
Okay, that's super lethal.
Fellscream
There's the
Blast.
Fellscream.
That's it. Yeah.
That makes our lives much easier.
Yeah. Oh, even an ambush for another target he had, if that skull wasn't there, to be able to cast that second I-beam.
Yeah.
You possess.
And there you go. Clean 24. DeadDraw could have had another 16 on top of that.
Yeah.
That means that the Demon Hunter, after such a slow build-up, gets it done almost immediately. You can tell DeadDraw had been doing the math and already knew what outs he had off the top like 5 turns prior to it actually coming together, just by the speed of which he went for that. You can tell he's really practiced on the deck, which again makes me wonder about the Il'gynoth play from the first game.
Yeah, I mean, he was shaking his head for pretty much the entire game. So either he didn't like the pan out or was disagreeing with himself for making that that play. I don't know. Burn Mage can be scary, though, when you're looking at the other side. You're thinking, I got to get a minion on board or else all these arcane missiles are going to hit me in the face. But, you know, this deck's designed to take a punch. It's got all that healing. And obviously, with just a single Fellscream Blast, you can kill people, so you don't need all like the I-beams and the Fellscream Blast and whatnot. So, but all tied up 1-1. You can see that there was a very small opening for Bozzzton in that game. After the Consume Magic was used, if he had maybe hit a Questing Adventurer, that game could have been different. But, you know, from that point on, it just didn't feel close. Just hitting him with 1-1s and DeadDraw's like, I have 10 cards, I don't know what to do. Which ones do I, you know, throw away, essentially, to make room for my lethal?
You're talking about how this World Kick Rogue doesn't really run out of stuff, and in a weird way, Bozzzton never had an empty hand that game. It's just that he drew all of the cards that make other cards better, but don't work together. The preps, the shadow steps, but none of the questings, not enough of the one thieves, for example, and even the second miscreant could have gotten a lot done. The lack of questing was the nail in the coffin, really, but now it means we are at a tight series, and DeadDraw appears to be queuing up yet another combo deck, but it's not a strict combo deck because it has a lot of tempo elements to go along with the ETC, and of course Rattlegore on the top end to just outvalue some slower decks.
Yeah, I really do like this variation of the ETC Warrior as opposed to like the full-on control variant. I think if you're going to play control, like Silas seems, the Silas Ashton build seems better. But this one, it just works so well with ETC because it makes those breakpoints easier. You know, if you want a combo, right? Because you're more likely to get the board and keep the board early, and you have minions that can push damage early, and weapons that can swing face early, which means that, you know, if you bring your opponent down sub 20 health, it just makes that combo easier, makes you able to pick up those wings easier, and sometimes you don't even need it. So, definitely a fan.
I agree, and the Rattlegore on the top end there, against certain decks, you can kind of use it as a 2-turn lethal setup as well. For example, if you get the ETC combo but it's not quite 30, if you supplement that with the 9 or 8 from your Rattlegore that's stuck, plus the fact that it was also given Rush by the Broomstick, sometimes you can put together the 30 nice and clean. For Bozzzton, it is his turn on the OTK Demon Hunter, and we did see DeadDraw with 2 tries on it, one game which was very unconventional, and another which was pretty much bread and butter. I think the toughest decision for him there was really just whether to dump the Consume Magic. Now I'm excited to see how Bozzzton pilots it because it is largely the same list.
Yes. And against this warrior deck, things can get a little weird, right? Because you as at least for the warrior, you have to decide really early what kind of game you're going to play. There's really not a huge world where you can out armor the combo, because usually if you're saving all your combo pieces to build up armor, it means you're playing slowly, which is giving the Demon Hunter time to draw cards, and if they can draw cards and get enough cards discounted and enough Moarks copied, they can find a way to deal just about any number of damage. But at the same time, you have to ensure that you are dealing that amount of damage, because if the warrior's just holding on to resources, they can also just deal the lethal back if they're just amassing resources and amassing armor. So it's whether or not you want to try and play for tempo and that quick win and force the Demon Hunter on the back foot, or if you want to try and play that defensive and force those awkward ways to combo with no minions on board for the Demon Hunter.
I certainly feel as though the first game plan for Warrior is to just start off with tempo, and if Demon Hunter can answer that pretty efficiently in the early game, that's when they can try and, you know, slow down, put together the Risky Skipper plus Armor Smith, and accrue those armor totals that make the Demon Hunter's headache, at least the less experienced Demon Hunters, such as myself. As for Demon Hunter damage breakpoints, they can pretty often deal 36 and 48 in my experience, even without Lucky Skull discounts, but the Lucky Skull discounts are what make the world of a difference here. If your Il'gynoth is cheaper, or crucially Moarg Artifice are down to 0 and can also be copied for 0 instead of just having the first copy cost 0 and the rest 2, like it would if you use Raging Fell Screamer. That's when the really ridiculous damage totals become available.
Yeah, and I also find the biggest thing when you're dealing with a warrior that's amassing armor is if they are going for that game plan, like you mentioned, they go for tempo early on, it doesn't work out. They stop playing minions, and then not only do you have to figure out these puzzles, you also have to figure out how you can do it by using Fellscream Blast and I-Beams on your own minions, and how that affects the math. And that's where players like Derek Brown mess up constantly.
It's very relatable, Derek. Don't worry about it. But I'm really glad that TJ managed to fit in that disc, because we did have a very memorable practice session just a few nights prior where TJ did absolutely nothing in the end game and Derek just blew up.
I was just pressing armor up and looking at him funny, and that was enough for him to crumble under the pressure. All right, Ankar played. Also has Corsair Cache. Corsair Cache picking up the Reaper Scythe is actually quite powerful because then that third charge means that's 12 damage. That is a lot of damage. Now, sometimes that doesn't matter against OTK Demon Heart because they have so much healing, and unless you're like taking full control of the board, then and pushing damage, then sometimes that can not matter. But if you're closing in, you got that ETC combo lined up, and you got a 12 damage over 3-turn weapon, you're cooking.
That's problematic for Bozzzton, though. His hand was so bad that he used studies in a, I would say, non-ideal mana breakpoint, because you generally want to use it going into when Skull is available. Picks up Spectral Sight to try and fish for something better to do, but the cost of that is that his Skull is now semi-trapped. I mean, if he wants, he can dump Philosophy, but then he would still have to dump the next 2 cards off the top to make room for Skull. I don't think it's very realistic. And so this just looks like a bad situation no matter how I look at it. It might even be a non-outcast Skull. Okay, given this play, it feels like Bozzzton wants to get it done from the other side, but he can't toss the other Ethereal Aug Merchant. He can't. You just can't toss it, right? Because then the damage break points won't work anymore if there's a lot of armor.
So I think this is in the first Skull is going to not be outcast.
Yeah, that's where my head's at.
Yeah. Because I think some players tunnel on Skull outcast, and it almost feels like the card is not even playable. Like it's not even able to be played from your hand unless it's in the outcast position, which is just not the case. It's a nourish.
Yeah, or a buffed sprint. Dude.
There you go.
Or one less card.
Sprint with the Sorcerer's Apprentice on it with one less card.
I am really bad at analogies, is what I learned today.
It's a Battle Rage, but it costs 4 more mana.
And it already has at least 2 damage-friendly characters built in.
Yep.
Sweet. So, what you think about the Soul Cleave? Not great, huh?
I grow impatient.
I just think that he needs to start using some of these cards because it definitely feels like the Skull is going to be cast for full cost without outcast, and so whatever he draws will be full cost, which means he can't immediately dump what he draws on that turn as well.
I grow impatient.
So my head defaults to just like Soul Cleave and swing into the Sword Eater, even though it feels pretty bad.
Yeah.
Oh, he's using an Augmerch. Okay, I'm not sure what breakpoint this can do anymore. I think Bozzzton is just saying that I don't expect you to get that much armor in this game, but DeadDraw's expression, yeah.
Yeah. Because DeadDraw is a very experienced OTK Demon Hunter player. When you see that that second Aug Merchant gone, because that's a very cheap way to increase your damage by a good amount, and also gives you targets, right? Targets that's not your Moarg, if you need to target your own stuff to get those combos done. So it's a crucial piece in that puzzle later on in the game.
Using this Aug Merchant tells me that Bozzzton is committed to getting the Skull discount. So he wants to get the Skull fully to the left side. And he absolutely does need the discounts at this point to hit something good. Otherwise, there's a lot of breakpoints he won't be able to reach with the armor.
It's kind of funny. By playing the Ethereal Aug Merchant, he forces himself to need the discounts of Skull. And by playing but also he needed to play it to get the discount of Skull. It's like a symbiotic relationship.
I would call that parasitic for sure, TJ.
Okay, I don't know.
It certainly doesn't feel like a
these words are too big for me. I felt like symbiotic was a glass half full kind of approach to the whole Ethereal Aug Merchant Skull of Gul'dan situation.
Oh. I mean, if I still recall anything from my bio classes, pretty sure symbiotic is just working together, usually in a positive context.
They are!
Positive for DeadDraw.
They're motivating each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, On the other hand, DeadDraw has had not many tough decisions here, just steals away the Eldraki Warblades, continues putting on minion presence. The one thing he doesn't have going for him, I guess, is the lack of risky skipper. So Armorsmith plus skipper combo for big armor gains is not available just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Demons?
Well, the discount on the skull, not the biggest of deals.
Yeah.
Got it.
These are not
Illidari
great.
Studies, Fellscreen Blast, only 3 mana worth of discounts if you want to look at it that way. And sometimes I-Beam isn't even a discount, right?
Correct, if it
you
goes-
have to cast it from outcast position, it costs 1 again no matter what.
I mean, it's not the worst ever because those are technically still combo pieces, the Fellscream Blast and the I-Beam. So he can still put together OTK breakpoints. The bigger problem is that he's kind of out of card draw. He probably won't have the time to get there, and even if, say, DeadDraw doesn't have one of those aggro hands, it means he'll at the very least have time to accrue armor, all of which is a negative for Bozzzton. So I think his Illidari Studies needs to pull Skull, which is, the number one reason why you don't play Illidari even if it costs 0. You play it on the turn, you expect to use the card you get from it.
Yeah. Well, DeadDraw has a couple approaches here. You can either draw cards or just go for pressure with just playing out the Blood Bowl Brute. And
I like that.
yeah, decides for pressure.
His card draw is just far too expensive at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with the Corsair Cache coming out next turn, he can Corsair Cache, Reaper Scythe, and if he doesn't care about the effect from it, can Cutting Class right there. Still push damage.
Right.
Be drawing a lot of cards.
Okay, so we can start to do some preemptive math for Bozzzton here. Because his Fellscream Blast and I-Beam cost 0, he can actually end up playing 3 Moargs and an Il'gynoth in a single turn and still have spells to get all of that damage done. Given that he doesn't have Ethereal Augmerchants anymore, I think that's the best he can hope for in terms of damage. The only question is whether he wants to already cash in the philosophies, because there's still this, chance that he gets discounted Moarg off of, say, this Skull of Gul'dan, and he can copy instead 0-cost Moargs. Problem then is hand space, because right now the Skull, there's no room for it. Okay, unless he uses this I-Beam. Man, a lot of this feels questionable.
Poor warlock.
But I see where his head is at, for sure. Okay, doesn't hit discounted Moarg. So, in terms of his maximum damage output, we can already do the math, right? Because at most it's 3 Moargs and Il'gynoth, and then double Fellscream Blasts. Bigger question, does he have the time to get there?
And he would need one more full turn to be able to do that, and he can afford to part ways with I-Beam, but not the Fellscream Blast at this point in order to try and heal out of range. But that's really the only thing he could part ways with next turn. He has Immolation or I-Beam to get him through the turn.
I mean, if there are enough targets, does the fact that he has 2 Fellscream Blasts ever get him there with just 2 Moargs? So that means that each Fellscream Blast with 2 Moargs and Il'gynoth would deal 12, assuming it has the full amount of targets. And so DeadDraw would not be dead next turn. So you're right, he does need, Bozzzton does need a full turn to copy at least 1 more Moarg.
Yeah.
My hand is full.
And I think
If my math
DeadDraw
is right.
Yeah, no, I think it was. I think DeadDraw was kind of thinking of the same thing. Like, do I Corsair Cache, equip a weapon, keep my board smaller? Like, keep only 2 minions on the board, so that way, it could be a little bit harder for him to piece together this damage. But without their Augmerchant, the Hero Augmerchant affects the Fellscream Blast even more because you're doubling it up on more minions instead of just a single I-Beam, and exponential. Is that, I don't know. I think exponential is the word.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
well, I know exponential is a word, but I don't know if it's the correct word for that situation.
Oh, it is. It's exponents of 2
Nice.
that the Moargs are dealing damage
Multiplying.
here. Yeah. And so
Maths.
correct maths. I think Bozzzton can't get out of this because the way to clear this board involves breaking apart his combo, and if he breaks apart his combo, he just doesn't have enough damage.
What is he drawing for?
Alas, poor war.
Oh, I guess the Fell Screamer.
Oh, Fell
Okay.
Screamer and
Okay.
then Philosophy? Does that get him there?
I forgot to factor that in. I think this turn he was very much just expecting to clear the board, not trying to get lethal. This Fell Screamer changes things now, because I forgot to account for there being another source of Moargs. Crucially, he also discounted Blood Mage Thalnos, so that's kind of like an Aug Merchant coming back in. Problem is he's used 1 Fell Scream Blast. So now the math is difficult once more. So only one of these Moargs will cost 0. And then if he wants to play 3 of them, it would be 9 mana, including the Philosophy. And then Blood Mage Thalnos fits. And then Fell Scream Blast fits. So I think there's a lethal here.
It's 16 plus...
There's an I-Beam too, right?
No, it is, right? 16 plus... Wait, the I-Beam... Fell Scream Blast alone is on 3 targets, 8 times 3, 24.
Uh-huh.
Can you I-Beam first? No, you can't I-Beam first, because there's no minions on the other side.
Oh my god. Okay, so if you
And
Fell
if you-
Scream
if you-
Blast,
oh.
you kill off Thalnos and 2 Moargs, that would leave 1 more Moarg that you can then I-Beam, and then that's 6 plus 24, so it's like 1 off? Is that right?
Yeah, 6 plus 24. Yeah, it's 1 off.
Oh my goodness. Maybe there's a different
the
order
Chaos
I'm not
Strike?
spotting.
The Chaos Strike?
Oh, the Chaos Strike! You're right! You're right! I forgot about that.
So 24
Chaos
plus
Strike
6,
for
2, right? It should be 32?
Yeah. I think so. Oh, he I-Beam first? Does this work too? Oh, okay. So just
Wait, what?
I-Beam was enough.
Okay, just the I-Beam.
I'm so...
Because he got 3 Mohawks. Oh my gosh.
right. I didn't even
See,
we don't make things too much, too difficult for us.
too complicated, yeah. This is exactly what I was worried about for casting OTK Demon Hunter all weekend.
Right.
Is no matter how much you practice it, there's still situations where you tunnel on one thing, and then that happens. But the important part is that Bozzzton found it
Correct.
and had one over lethal, and even had enough to Fell Scream Blast at the end. Which,
Correct.
Without the Thalnos wouldn't have been as much, right? Because it would only been 4. Still been 12 damage, but that was plenty enough for him to get the job done. So that previous turn, knowing the Fell Screamer still in his deck, emptying it out, clearing the board, and playing the Fell Screamer, very nicely done.
Yes, the Fell Screamer was the ace in the hole that I forgot to account for towards the end. It's a really tough decision to have to get rid of Ethereal Aug Merchants that early. I still think, were I in his spot, I might not have parted ways with it like that and maybe just played the Skull for no discounts. I don't think I would have gotten the same pan out, but for DeadDraw there, I mean, I think he did the best he could with what he was given, which was a highly tempo-oriented hand and no skippers to get much armor.
Yeah.
So in the end, as it often does feel like, it is the onus completely on the Demon Hunter to put together their game plan.
Yeah. Double Armor Smith in hand, a Risky Skipper could have, with how that game panned out, could have blown that wide open. We focused a lot on Bozzzton and what he was doing just because that deck is so complicated, but
Correct.
There was opportunities for DeadDraw to draw more aggressively. With the cutting class and trying to pick up resources earlier, but I'm not saying that I disagree with his line. I'm saying that'd be interesting to see how the game panned out if he went for that instead of the kind of tempo, pressure-oriented style that he decided to go for after seeing the other Og Merchants played. But DeadDraw going to switch it up and go with Mizaki Mage. This is the headliner. This is the one that I've been most excited for because, I play against one Mizaki Mage for every 10 OTK Demon Hunters on ladder. So this is the unicorn.
It's a spicy one for sure, and there's a reason for its underrepresentation on ladder, that being that it really doesn't have that many ways of stalling until it gets to the OTK, not nearly as much as Demon Hunter, and it doesn't have the healing that Demon Hunter and even OTK Warriors have. On the other hand, it does have the potential to finish the game much earlier than either of those, but it's heavily dependent on whether you get Mizaki early, and on top of that, whether you get the mana biscuits at the right time.
Yeah, mana biscuits early, Mizaki early, and then your Source's Apprentice and a cram session away from the game being over, which is quite a scary proposition. I think it's the deck that can OTK the fastest if the stars align.
Correct.
Because the earliest that OTK Demon Hunter can do it is 7? Right?
I would assume something like that. Yeah, if you got the perfect skull, say, on 6, and then you do the thing on 7. Mizaki Mage, there have been worlds where you just drop that on 5 against, say, Druid. They can't deal with it, and then they're dead the next turn. So maybe turn 6 is what Mizaki Mage can do.
You could do it naturally on 5. You go, it's Biscuit on 2, Biscuit on 3.
Sure. Yeah.
And then
Mizaki,
Biscuit, Source's Apprentice,
Cram Session,
bunch of cheap spells, Cram Session, yeah. So you could do it naturally on turn 5 from hand if you get the right hand, which is just insane. Actually, you could do it on 4 with the coin. It's even better.
It absolutely is. On top of that, you would maybe even have played say Encounter's Flow early on, so maybe Apprentices not even necessary. There's just a lot of potential in this deck.
Yeah, there you go.
A lot of potential for disaster.
Yep. All right, Bozzzton, last deck he's got remaining is the Whirl Kick Rogue. And Questing Adventure in the opening hand, but DeadDraw does have some answers available. It does have the Mana Biscuit as well to be able to bank that. Oh, we're a cram session away. All right.
Yeah.
And an Apprentice. But that's exciting. Oh, yes.
It truly, truly is. Apprentice, Encounter's Flow, etc. That's what DeadDraw wants to see at this point. Cram Session being the big one. Because at this point, having the Mizaki in hand, you don't even necessarily need the Auctioneer as your card draw engine anymore. It's just Cram Session with all the discounts you can already get, or sorry, all the buffs you can get from Mizaki alone. Could blow the game out of the water. However, you have to note that Bozzzton has, something pretty spicy cooking up. He has a Questing Adventure plus One Thief Shadow Step next turn. I like the idea of that.
Yeah, I am definitely on board. And if that was the case, he would just play Foxy Fraud as a 3-2 this turn. I wouldn't have even minded that.
Yep.
I guess he could just can into or Potion of Illusion.
Ooh, that is super spicy. Yeah. Playing the One Thief this turn, I think, is super reasonable. DeadDraw is not going to feel like he needs to expend resources to get rid of a 1-2. And the Potion of Illusion makes things pretty fun. Of course, Prep doesn't quite discount it enough to be played alongside Questing Adventure next turn, but things will stick for Bozzzton in the near future, and that means he has follow-up after the Questing turn.
What? Oh, is he thinking about going for it now? If he coined potions, then next turn he can go Questing, Foxy Fraud, Wand Thief, Shadow Step Wand Thief, But if that were the case, I feel like you just go for it now. Yeah, you just go for it now. Adding the potion into this equation is too fancy. Too fancy.
Right. I think it's just a question of whether he wants to say like prep Abyss this turn. I'm all for just buffing the questing out of range of say Frostbolt Ping.
Yeah. Oh, he could coin Tome.
Oh yeah, he got Tome. Okay, that's
that pickup.
much
Yeah,
better
he got
one.
Tome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have heard an argument for even coin prep passage that turn if he had not gotten Tome, but the Tome makes things a lot easier. Now he has a good distribution of resources while still having his questing at a threatening health total. And now DeadDraw needs to allot his freezes quite wisely, or he can just clear off the questing right now. I like the sound of that. Frostbolt with Brain Freeze.
Yeah, but that Frostbolt is 25 damage.
But this missiles is 25 damage.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, how many 25 damage spells do you really need?
1 1/5.
There you go. Yeah, just suck it up, DeadDraw. Get it over with.
I mean, realistically, this could still be problematic for DeadDraw because he does not have card draw. There is Gadget-san, which he can of course do on turn 6 with the Mana Biscuit, and that's going to get a lot done, but it also, the use of the Mana Biscuit can make the Mizaki turn a bit more difficult to navigate. Also, this top deck for Bozzzton. Hello? Best possible top deck?
Yeah, what do you prep the Eviscerate, or do you prep Secret Passage and just
I like the passage.
like nail a Shadow Step?
Yeah, even if it's not Shadow Step, like another One Thief, I'd take a Pharaoh Cat.
Yeah. I'd even take a Nitro Boost potion and just plop it on this Wand Thief.
Yeah. I'm on board. The name of the game is just, you know, building the most resilient board possible, because next turn, at the very least, you want a Potion of Illusion 1 minion. Okay,
Yeah.
it's going for Abyss instead.
No faith. No faith. Trust your deck.
Yeah, DeadDraw is absolutely trusting his decks by bringing this kind of lineup.
Yeah.
Okay, this might sound stupid, but is there room for a Tempo Mizaki play here?
No.
Because he could do something
wait.
like Mizaki, Biscuit,
Mizaki-
and then Freeze and Missiles, and a lot of the time the Missiles deals with the minions that can still attack.
Mm.
But it is really, really bad if Bozzzton can clear the Mizaki. And, you know, I was the one kind of griping on DeadDraw's early Il'gynoth play, so I'm not going to knock him on this one. He's instead just going to extend his timer by using Ray of Frost like this. Next turn, he has Gadget-san with the other Ray of Frost, so he's safe for the near future.
Pharaoh Cat, Potion of Illusion.
Job done.
Here we go,
It's gotta be
TJ.
pretty scary. Oh, jeez.
I mean, this is where the fun begins. Auctioneer. Oh, he got the Apprentice! That's insane.
Oh.
That is like the best draw off the top here. Now, the majority of the spells he gets from the Auctioneer will be free. Although, he only has 2 shots at it right now, and not to mention, he doesn't really want to use Arcane Missiles, because that's one of the Mizaki pieces.
Oh, Ray of Frost. Oh!
That's insane. I'm not sure what the reasoning for starting with Missiles as opposed to Ray of Frost is, because I feel like Ray of Frost is always happening anyway. Not a big deal. Questing dead. Cards drawn. Second Biscuit available. Mizaki about to get spicy. Oh, okay. Train stopped a bit earlier than I thought.
So this is awkward.
Indeed.
Can't even kill the questing.
The Auctioneer, you mean?
Give me a
Auctioneer, yeah, sorry. I was looking at his questing. And I was like, oh, he
Yeah.
can't even kill the auctioneer. He can
He
find a
absolutely
way.
does play the questing. Okay, there's
Well, he can't
Clear.
he can kill the Gadgetzan auctioneer, but then he would leave the Sorcerer Apprentice on board, which is that's a no-no. I guess both of them are a no-no.
yeah. I mean, you could either trade it away or just Arcane Breath the Apprentice. I mean, it's not the greatest questing buff, but I think you take it. Just 2 spells, get rid of DeadDraw's minions and carry on.
Oh my! Oh, that positioning.
Yeah, that is spot on from DeadDraw.
Betrayal and combustion.
Impressive.
Yeah. But alas, DeadDraw's still under a lot of pressure now, and still needs some time.
Look at this,
I
though.
guess Arcane Explosion.
Astromancer.
Explosion.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah, just all the 2 mana cards played this turn. He is in absolutely no danger of dying next turn, and then DeadDraw pops off next turn. I guess he doesn't have that much card draw, but I have faith in his intellect. He'll find the cram session eventually.
Oh. Play all your
know if-
minions?
Yeah, and Passage? I would like to see some prize plunderers right now if I were Bozzdton.
I guess. Yeah, I guess you don't
I
want to
play
leave
the
this much
cheap
spell
minions.
damage up.
At this point, it's kind of like the Prime is an actively bad card in DeadDraw's deck right now that I want to get it shuffled in. Stop his train of Mizaki. Seems desperate.
Weirdly true. Weirdly true.
Yeah. Roswell, okay. Maybe Bozzdton can set up his own 2-turn. I think it still involves Passage. Wasteland Assassin feels very fragile, given that there's still another explosion and missiles.
Wait, can he? No. I was gonna say, what if he throws Frostbolt Eviscerate Ace? Does he have any lethal outs? But he's already used 1 Eviscerate. He would need Eviscerate plus like
Right.
double Nitro Boostion with a weapon equipped. That's unlikely.
Oh man, still no cram session, so Mizaki getting delayed a little bit longer. Probably not a problem in the grand scheme of things for DeadDraw, but if if Bozzdton had had like a little bit more time to accrue damage, could get scary. All right, the big guns have been assembled. Bozzdton has this turn or nothing. Is there a way he can discover a secret to mess with DeadDraw? Not
Can Netherwind Portal get anything that ruins his play?
I don't think so. Jandis? Whirl Kick? I mean, Jandis puts the most stats on the board, so if DeadDraw, for example, gets Arcane Missiles but not Arcane Explosion, sometimes you're messing with the Mizaki Lethal. It is all very overly hopeful from me, but that's all I got.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm so excited, TJ. It's been a long time since I've seen a Mizaki Lethal, and I think the first time I've seen it on a Hearthstone Esports stream for the Master Sword
Yeah.
system.
Yeah. So every spell in his deck except for... Oh no, yeah, every spell is free, right? Because he played both Arcane Intellects last turn?
The only expensive card is the Prime right now. And, you know,
Yeah,
he'll draw
and second
more
Auctioneer.
than that. Yeah, Prime and Auctioneer. The Cram Session will draw him more than enough to get the job done. So all he needs to do is hit the other Arcane Missiles, and I believe this would be a GG.
Yep. And I think it's, as long as spell is picked up off the top, or you can pick up a cheap spell for Magic Trick, that should be guaranteed.
Woo! That is Giga guaranteed now.
Yeah.
The only tricky thing from this point is kind of optimizing your hand space for Cram Session while still making sure you get to draw everything, but given how experienced DeadDraw was with the Demon Hunter turn, I think this will be a piece of cake for him. All the mana, TJ. All the biscuits.
8 card? Oh, 6 cards.
Kind of underwhelming, right? Below average for Mizaki.
9. So it's a 9. Frostbolt is 9 damage right now.
Yeah.
10 damage,
Doesn't
11
care about-
damage.
There's the other missiles. Never mind the fatigue, doesn't matter. I mean, one more card would have mattered for sure, but the rest of it is well enough for
Oh,
them.
another
And
Frostbolt.
another
Oh,
bolt.
jeez.
Pretty sure that was unnecessary, but
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah, it wasn't necessary because he would have had lethal with the first Frost dealt 14. Arcane Missiles would have dealt 15. And then...
You know, he had Evocation too for more spell damage. so
Evocation, sure. Yeah. Insane.
just a regular Saturday evening for DeadDraw, it appears. I mean, that was very impressive to see and very fun to watch towards the end there, but it is not the final game in the series, as he still has perhaps the least flashy OTK deck left in the Warrior up against Bozzzton's Rogue.
Yeah, Rogue underperforming right now for Bozzzton, but I guess it's sort of expected given the lineups for both players. Rogue is one of those decks that's like, you know, doesn't have enough burst to like OTK or kill from hand. It's not quite aggressive enough to kill these OTK decks before they can get combos off. Your hope is really to, you know, try and get those super fast starts and get those questing adventures that Bozzzton had. Like his opening was actually quite good. He just wasn't able to get there.
Yeah, it's quite interesting the way it panned out. I mean, a lot of mage draws. Funnily enough, the ideal cards you want as mage sometimes interact badly against those questing starts because you don't want to be just playing a mana biscuit while they develop their questing. You want to make sure you have at least the Frostbolt or the Ray of Frost. DeadDraw had the best of both worlds in the early game, and that was really the key here. For Bozzzton, my only question is whether maybe the first Secret Passage could have been played a bit earlier. I was definitely a fan of being a bit more aggressive with it, but all things considered, I think DeadDraw piloted that in such a way that Bozzzton had almost no outs.
Yeah, quite impressive, and did get a little bit of help himself, but it's crazy where we live in a world where like World Kick Rogue, which is like this, you know, sort of tried and true Rogue deck, right? The pieces of that deck have been around for a long time. They've just had additional tools added. A good draw for that deck gets bested by a good draw from Mizaki Mage.
Right.
Which, not that, there's a good amount. I'd say there's more than I expected that are playing the deck in the field this weekend, but definitely not quite as many as you'd expect people playing World Kick Rogue, but
For sure.
we shall see. Last matchup's going to come down to that Warrior versus Rogue. Bozzzton currently 0-2 with the Rogue deck. We'll see if he can muster it up against the ETC Temple Warrior.
Yeah, and I'm honestly not a big fan of this matchup for the Rogue. Just any form of warrior that has Risky Skip or Armor Smith seems to be a tough matchup for these aggressive rogues. But then again, there are certain curves that they can hit that just try and smack the warrior in the head before they even have the time to draw into those big armor combos. Questing Adventure also just a big one in this matchup, especially since DeadDraw is only running one chorus.
Yeah, and that is the difference between like this the ETC Warrior and say like the standard Tempo Pain Warrior, whatever you want to call it, is that it does have like Coerce, which gives it a little bit of removal against like a big questing adventure. One thing about this deck though is that sometimes it can have those awkward draws, as with any combo deck, right? Even though this isn't a full combo deck, it's got win conditions outside of just the OTK combo. ETC is just kind of there for that finishing damage, but the deck can definitely put on pressure without it. Is that sometimes you get combo pieces, but nothing else. Sometimes you get the animated broomsticks and the bloodsworn mercenaries, but you don't have ways to utilize those things. And usually you have to dump them early, which just puts you in a bad spot all around. So DeadDraw though, Ankar in the opening hand, those are the things you like to see.
Ankar is insane here. I was going to bring up the point that a lot of the time you can end up just tossing risky skipper when you have the Ankar, but we see DeadDraw just holding on to it on top of the Ankar because with the inclusion of Sword Eaters, it means that you're not guaranteed to get risky skippers off of your Ankar, and it's also just such an important card to have in your back pocket for that burst armor gain later on.
Sure is.
I'm excited, TJ. This could be a Colossus of the Moon game. Could be one of those days.
Yeah, I will take a Rattlegore over a Colossus of the Moon any day.
I mean, that's if the Rattlegore is there. Could be at the bottom, but the Colossus is here right now.
I mean, even if it's pretty near the bottom, by the time we get to turn 10, we're going to be close.
Stop ruining my dreams. Colossus can solo this matchup if there's no Rattlecore. That's what I think.
You are correct.
Ooh, spicy. I mean, he can get it up to 4-4 this early. Not quite the safest position to be with an Ankar on the other side, but if it sticks, that's a lot of cheap minions he can play afterward to continue buffing.
Yeah, I mean, 4-4, there's a lot of things that answers it. Warmaul Challenger would be able to answer it. Could swing with the Ankar Warmaul Challenger. It'd still be alive at 2 health. Evo Quartermaster into either Rush Lackey or Kobold Lackey, Coerce.
All things considered, though, if he hadn't gone for the questing play, this turn would have been quite awkward because he would want to swindle anyway, and using the prep means the eventual questing turn gets kind of bad. So overall, I like it from Bozzzton. If DeadDraw answers it, at the very least, he takes 4, and then Bozzzton can carry on with his Miscreant curve.
Yeah. And DeadDraw does have some ways to answer it, but they're not ways. Well, it's one way really, which is the Lord Barav, but that's such a powerful key card in the game that you don't really want to use it this early for just tempo. He could dig with Evil Quartermaster, but he might just take this opportunity to draw and then maybe Lord Barav next turn.
Yeah, it's really not pretty. I kind of like actually maybe just swing with the Ankar and then go Swordmaster. So a lot of the time it tanks the questing hit and then he goes for the Barov clear on the next turn.
Okay.
Oh, major respect though. Okay. So this play is a good spot. He can use the Barov to clear the questing but still holds on to both skippers, which are such crucial cards as I've mentioned again and again. It's an interesting compromise, which I guess is scary if it's exactly the second questing, but everything else, I kind of think it leaves DeadDraw in a good spot.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is also the Lord Barav itself is actually pretty threatening for Bozzzton because with Evil Miscreant played, he's got a hand not full of 1/1s, but with 1/1s in it. And, you know, if he spends 2 mana daggering up to clear off this Lord Barav before he starts development, DeadDraw just gets to play a Sword Eater that's essentially uncontested. But Bozzzton does have a way around this and a way to develop outside of it, but I think DeadDraw's still in a good position to be able to clean up this board with the Sword Eater. Yeah,
it's a really good point you bring up because not only did DeadDraw make the turn awkward for Bozzzton, he just got rid of the persistent threat of the questing. And Bozzzton there didn't get baited by feeling bad about having to expend 2 1/1s to get rid of the Barov. I think it's absolutely worth the immediate tempo of Foxy Fraud and Miscreant to use Kobold Lackey as opposed to Dagger. This evolve the Miscreant, the other order. Oh, that's a disaster! Because it blows up his board if he uses Eviscerate. I guess my first order was correct after all, TJ.
Is it Colossus of the Moon time yet?
4 more turns. Be patient. He'll get there.
I wonder.
Matchup's going slow. I think we'll see the Colossus. Obviously, Bozzzton kind of has to pivot now. This card does too much damage off of the AoE spell burst effect, so it looks like it's going to be Lackey and Dagger up. Awkward.
I'm going to give this taunt. You need to kill it because I don't want it anymore.
Good way of looking at it. So, cutting class seems pretty high up on my priority list because it's likely he will be swinging. I don't know what the rest of the turn is because I'm honestly just looking at like a skipper plus bloodsworn turn. It's very, very low value for those cards, but I think given that Bozzzton has had kind of a low value game plan, I don't mind DeadDraw just playing for tempo. Start with that. Okay, we could see Skipper Challenger instead. Or just Challenger even.
Yeah, go. I like this Skipper Challenger. Just try and clear things up. Second Skipper's in hand. There's no Armor Smith also, so it's not like you're saving, like one Skipper's guaranteed to be doing anything.
Correct.
No Battle Rage though, and a pretty low value hand outside of that. And this board is going to be easily apart.
Somewhat.
Wait, did he Warmaw Challenger before?
Before what?
Before attacking with the Sword Eater?
So many options.
He Sword Eatered into a different minion. Into the Finley.
Oh, okay.
And then the Warmaw went into the big taunt. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Bozzzton here
So
does go for the secret passage, which I think is warranted. The rest of his options were kind of bad, but I was just going to bring up that DeadDraw set up a board such that if it is Jandis on this turn, the risky skipper makes it very awkward.
Oh yeah, no, that's really smart because if he did, I was thinking he gave up a lot of health on Warmaw Challenger to kill that Finley.
Many options.
But because the dagger was set up, if he doesn't kill Finley, then you're right. The dagger goes over the Sword Eater because at the same health, the Finley goes over the risky skipper, and then Jandis isn't an option. So it gives up some health on the Warmaw Challenger to ensure that he's got a better position on the board for Jandis. It's a good call.
Yeah. And it's always just a little bit awkward the way Skipper interacts with the Warmaw, where the Warmaw attacks first and then the Skipper deals one to everything, but the Warmaw has already dealt the maximum damage it could to whatever it was targeting. So it's kind of hard to optimize, but I think DeadDraw did it the best way he could have that turn. My Colossus timer is down to T-4 turns. Still excited.
We're certainly getting there. Ah, man.
All right, this looks like a pretty simple
Judging by his
Quartermaster
hand
Sword
from Eater,
Eater.
he might even have 5. Yeah.
Yeah, he might not. And I don't think he has to swing into a 1-2. It's very unthreatening, and it's already challenged by the 2 minions he has on board. Maybe Shadow Step is a concern.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess more than that, Nitro Boost Poison is something to think about. Just leaving no minions for Bozzzton to buff is a big deal.
Yeah, because a single Nitro Boost mission would have been able to challenge that Sword Eater. Was fully expecting that to be another Colossus of the Moon.
I would have been significantly less excited about the second one. Great use of the spell damage here from Bozzzton. The mana works out really clean as well if he just wants to sweep up the Evil Quartermaster. I expect he does, just where to put the Nitro Boost is the question. And he's gonna even out his threats a little bit.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's a nod to Coerce. But without Coerce, DeadDraw is getting quite low on health. Because Boston's operating with very little resources, no burn damage. If this board was to be taking care of the burst that DeadDraw would have to attack into the vial, wouldn't be necessary, or it wouldn't even be worth it. DeadDraw still is. I mean, he's been able to answer everything. He's been able to play for tempo, but everything's he just doesn't have one thing to like piece it together, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't have Armor Smith or Battle Rage to be able to go off with Risky Skipper.
It's just been extremely awkward. You could see he was hovering the Skipper this turn because he wanted to get down the Blood Boil and copy it all in the same turn, because he knows that if this gets cleared by Bozzzton, then his Bloodsworns are looking very useless on the next turn. But he decides that it's a little bit too wasteful of a use of the Skipper, and by going about it this way, he still puts a decent health total on the Blood Boil. I think it was very well navigated, and he'll get majorly rewarded next turn.
Yep.
Oh, my
And,
dreams! They're being
At this rate,
dashed.
it looks like Boz is going to die literally the turn before Colossus of the Moon is able to be played.
Not like this. Passage off the top? I mean, this turn is just play your 2 other cards and feel sad about it.
Do you
At least
swing?
one has stealth. I'm gonna say no, TJ. Very
Yeah, but it
decisive
gets
no.
rid of the Bloodsworn Mercenary. It makes it weaker for Bloodsworn Mercenary.
I'm gonna still say no.
All right. I wouldn't have done it either, but was just thinking out loud. Do you play natural one and then one Bloodsworn, or do you just double Bloodsworn? I kind of just like double Bloodsworn.
I'm into it.
Why not? Because you get the both 2/2 bodies on board, plus each of these Bloodsworn has 2 power.
Right.
2 additional power. So it's just one dies.
One. Which one dies?
So let's say you played double Bloodsworn Mercenary, right? And traded over the questing adventure. One of the Bloodsworns would have been vulnerable to the stealth minion, right? It would have died. So this is actually more power over 2 turns, because now if Bozzzton wants to kill it, he would have to trade his weapon in to kill one of them. So this is like more power over 2 turns, assuming that Bozzzton doesn't draw a spell at the top that kills it, by going with this instead of the double Bloodsworn Mercenary.
TJ, you said a lot of smart things. Unfortunately, the only thing occupying my thoughts is how this Colossus is not going to see the light of day. I'm so sad!
He conceded with 9 mana and only a Colossus of the Moon in hand. How fitting.
I'm so
But,
sad.
well, maybe next time. Maybe next time. But DeadDraw takes the win 3-2. Quite a close series, and I say pretty well fought. He had that rough game early on, playing the Il'gynoth early on and getting fatigued out of the game by the Burn Mage from Bozzzton. But outside of maybe that like one singular play, thought DeadDraw played quite well. Honestly, thought Bozzzton played quite well. Also, it's just the Rogue could not get through with all these combo decks. It just never felt like it could gain enough traction. And ultimately, DeadDraw takes the win.
I didn't think that the Rogue would struggle this much. Maybe against the Warrior, that kind of makes sense. But I think that this any Rogue with Nitro Boost in it really, I feel, has a leg up against decks like Mizaki Mage. But DeadDraw's expertise on these OTK decks definitely showing how they can have a much better win rate in the hands of somebody who has put in the time to practice with them, as opposed to, say, your average 1 in 10 on ladder. The other 9 being OTK Demon Hunters, which people are also not very good at, and by people I mean myself.
I'm a whole lot worse, so. Well, it's funny because I